Minnesota Gardening Podcast. It is my honor to have you here with us today. My name is Brad Tadke. I'm the host of the podcast, and we have another great guest for you today. Sometimes we use the podcast, or I use the podcast, to learn about topics that I am not overly familiar with, and today is one of those days. We have Lance Ram with us here today from R&R Cultivation. They are mushroom growers here in Minnesota, and Lance takes us through just an awesome amount of information and knowledge as to how you can grow your own mushrooms, how they grow their own mushrooms at a larger scale, and all of that. So it's really awesome. They've got a ton of great pictures on Instagram, and you can really see how this all works. So we have, again, Lance Ram with us today. You can find the show notes for this episode if you go to minnesotagardening.com and search for mushrooms. You can see those pop up there, and roll with that. So hope you're having a great day and enjoy this episode. All right, today we have another great guest here to talk about a topic that I've been really interested in wanting to learn more about, is growing mushrooms. And so we have a co-founder of R&R Cultivation with Lance Ram here with us today to talk about growing mushrooms at your house. Lance, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Lance, you want to first start and just give a little bit of history about R&R Cultivation and what you guys do and how the whole thing works?
I'm a long-winded person, so I'll give you the condensed version if I can. So long story short, it's Nick and I. So Nick Robinson, Lance Ram, R&R Cultivation. I'll let that out of the bag so you're not puzzled over that. But the general concept is I co-founded a company about 15, almost 20 years ago now in the sustainability realm. And it ruined me in the worst way possible. I couldn't do anything else. It really focused me on local products, local food, local packaging, sourcing, opened up my eyes, went back to school for business, cut my teeth there, and came out of that and just tapped on Nick and said, we need to do something good in our community. And we both love food. We both love activity and athleticism and healthy aspects. And so I was actually worked with a local aquaponics hub and found mushrooms. It was about 4 years ago, and geeked out for about 6 months. Couldn't put it down. Every night looking at YouTube videos and reading books and understanding mycology and everything, and decided to just start it up as a hobby in the basement at Nick's house. And we both, were kind of basically starting up young families, just had bought houses, and our wives were like thinking that we were a little crazy, but we persevered. And lo and behold, now, about 3.5, almost 4 years later, I would consider us to be the foremost producer of mushrooms in Minnesota, growing-wise. We actually grow everything that we sell, and we're moving about upwards of about 3,000 pounds a week of mushrooms at High Point. And we do, as a caveat, we actually do buy and resell some agaricus mushrooms from locally sourced from Wisconsin, from a farmer over there. But everything else we grow in-house, about a dozen varieties of mushrooms. And it's just been a fantastic, wild, hard, but very, very rewarding ride here.
Where do most of your mushrooms go? Are they for like individuals to use cooking, or do they go to restaurants or grocery stores, or how's your distribution look?
Yeah. So we started off, the model was grow and sell. I mean, just learning about the process, caring for the mushrooms, growing quality product. And the best way to do that was to sell through farmers markets. And so we linked arms with the Lowertown St. Paul market first. And they've by far been our best market, really in deep with that system. We're actually slated for almost 35 markets this next year. So we've definitely been keeping that up. And that's direct to consumer. It allows us to really kind of talk to people in the community and to get them not only like aware of what mushrooms are, but kind of help tamp down the bias that a lot of people have. Like, I don't know what to do with them. They're weird. I don't like them. Sam, I am. Type of situation, and just convince them that, try them for the first time. And you may actually like them with a couple of very, very just simple cooking techniques. So that's been sort of the charge, is starting with the farmers markets, pivoting to restaurants. And then when COVID hit, actually, it sort of forced our hand to look to grocery. And thank goodness we actually cold called Lunds & Byerly's the February of 2020, right before COVID hit. We're building out 4 grow rooms. We're expanding. We're taking a huge risk. And that spring, of course, everyone knows COVID hit. Lunds & Byerly's has been our fantastic savior. Up in poundage, full support, amazing partner to help us kind of cut our teeth on grocery, learn about packaging and distribution and all that stuff. And we've actually hired about 15 to 20 workers in this process as we've grown the past about year and a half to almost 2 years now, through grocery, through wholesale, different channels, but still wanting to stay very, very boots in the ground, very, very connected to the community, and always wanting to circle back to, what people are interested in and how we can provide them with good, nutritious food year round.
How do you, and I think I'm going to ask this question in two different parts, and you can answer it simultaneously if it works better for you, or we can talk about one and then the other. But what is the process for you and Nick growing mushrooms? Like, how does that process work? What's the time frame in that? And then the second part of that is how does that differ, or how is the same for someone who wants to grow mushrooms at their house?
Sure. There are some similarities to like microgreens. I saw you guys had an episode a few weeks ago on microgreens. It's called a couple different things: indoor growing, vertical gardening, whatever you want to call it. It's basically indoors. We're using an old warehouse space in Roseville, and now we have a facility working out of in New Hope as well. And it's controlling the climate in a building to stabilize the climate, and then setting up individual basically grow pods about 8 foot by 8 foot by about 20 feet in depth, basically shipping container side by side. You control the individual climates inside of the grow rooms and set up vertical shelving, and you want each grow room to be completely synced up to the mushroom's needs. And mushrooms like it, very high humidity, pretty consistent temperature, and keeping those things in balance with CO2, which is what they actually exhaust, which is the inverse of plants, is very tricky. Keeping those three things in balance requires a pretty high attention to detail, a bit of engineering knowledge, and some good luck at certain points. But we've grown from a small, basically 3x4 tent in the basement at first, where we were happy to get a single fruiting, as we call it, from the mushroom block. And I'll explain those terms in just a moment. But now, obviously at scale, we're producing, a couple thousand pounds a week of our own mushrooms. It's a very different game. We're trying to set up SOPs and harvest techniques and the right carts and the right movement and flow and all of those things that have been fantastic to learn. But for those of you at home, it really starts with, if you look on our website, it's called a Mushroom Grow Kit. It's the exact same thing that we produce our mushrooms off of. Hate to say it, a plastic bag. We're actually working towards compostable bags for the mushroom block itself. It's about 10 pounds of substrate, which is a mix of basically pulverized wood, and about half of it is a kind of a kicker for nutrients. Right now we're using spent soybean hulls. We're exploring some different hulls to actually get the caloric intake that the mushrooms need to eat through the wood, and it does its job. And we just put in some mushroom grain spawn, which is basically the seeds of the mushroom, and it populates that whole block. It eats through the wood, all those nutrients, almost like plants and soil. And once it gets to a certain point in that bag that's clear, you can see it. It kind of whites over with mushroom mycelium, which is, again, a big, heavy term that I can explain in just a moment. But you open the bag up and just, a slit, and then it exposes it to oxygen and humidity and all those fantastic things that it wants to grow a mushroom with, and put it on the shelf, and it grows mushrooms. And if it were that simple, it'd be fantastic. But for the home kits, it really is pretty simple. Doing one block or even a couple blocks is pretty simple. When we were back in the basement doing, 15 pounds a week, it was incredibly simple. Keeping things, humid and keeping it about 60 degrees was enough to produce mushrooms to go to market with. It's a lot more technical now. You're always keeping the room clean every single day, mitigating contamination, giving the mushrooms exactly what they need when they need it to optimize grow. The cadence of things for production. It becomes a different beast, but you always give it that fine attention to detail. So
do you guys make you make the blocks yourself? Is that something that is that how that works? And then you inoculate the blocks, and then those begin to grow mushrooms. Is it Like the kits,
Yeah.
is it that simple? I mean, is it like, what does a homeowner, like where will homeowners, if they get a kit from you guys, where would they run into issues, and where would they put it in their house, and how does that all work?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as a homeowner, I've actually early days I brought home these mushroom blocks, call them kits, for my kids, and it was fun to have them interact with them as 4 and 6 year olds, and really have them understand, be able to actually manage them by themselves. So I'm not saying that it's so easy a 4-year-old can do it, and if you have problems, you shouldn't have problems. But basically, what we're giving you as a kit, as a block, is a bag that's ready to go. It's already been produced by us. We produce all of our own blocks, and we inoculate them. We let them colonize. We make sure that they're all healthy and ready to go. And as a homeowner, you're basically going online. You're ordering the kit. You can either pick it up or have it delivered. And you take the bag, and as I said, instructions are online. Take a blade and just make a slit on the face of the block. And again, that exposure is enough to activate the mushroom block and tell it to start producing mushrooms. And then a couple of different ways. The easy kind of way to do it is just to kind of mist with a spray mist bottle the opening, the slit that you just made. And because mushrooms want really like as close to 100% humidity as possible, especially early on. About 90% humidity is what you're looking for. And so by misting it, continuously, not letting that opening dry out, you're really doing all that you really need to do. And the only caveat is they don't like direct exposure to sunlight continuously, but they can tolerate pretty fantastic conditions. Somewhere around 60 to 65 degrees, they work out really well, in the basements, but you can keep them in the kitchen too, as long as it's not like 72 degrees and direct exposure to sunlight. They'll kind of dry out in those conditions. But yeah, it is true. Like, I think I was told numerous times in the market, what was the running joke? It was like, mushrooms are like husbands, like keep them in the dark and keep them fed. And which I took, I was like, I resent that remark. And I also kind of resemble that remark. I'm not sure.
Right.
But yeah, they're pretty easygoing as far as temperament. You might get some that are a little bit longer than others. You might get some that kind of grow a little bit differently. But in all, I would say that they're a lot easier to grow than plants in many cases, because they aren't dependent upon that photosynthesis. They don't need direct sunlight. They actually want indirect sunlight. But it could be fluorescent light, it can be overheads, it can be office lighting, it could be next to a window, it can be a number of different things, and they'll grow for you as long as you keep them humid. The second option, which I prefer, which will get you more consistency, is taking a larger tote, preferably clear, and I actually took my kid's little humidifier and put it in there with it, and just let that thing kind of mist a little bit, and in that little closed environment with that mist, the block itself, really responded well and grew some really fantastic mushrooms. I was actually quite surprised myself the first time I did it, because I'm like, I just spent $3,000 on this HVAC system, the humidification system and all that, and I'm growing good mushrooms, but I just put this thing in a tub with a $10 humidifier and I grew fantastic mushrooms too. So the homeowner really does have that power to create some really fantastic mushrooms. And if you want to, if you buy a kit a week, you could actually produce enough mushrooms to feed your family. Really, with first and second and third flushes in most of the blocks, you can get about 5 pounds off of a block in totality over the course of maybe about 6 weeks. So if you just kept on buying blocks every week or two, you'd have a lot of mushrooms to deal with.
And that was my next question, as to, does it differ between different types of mushrooms that you get, or how does that harvesting process work? Is it just they're all ready at the same time and you cut them all off or break them off, or how does that work, and how much do you get out of a block?
Yeah. It's quite amazing. And if you, I guess the best way to do, I'm a very visual learner. I hope that maybe your audience is too. So I'll describe it visually as best I can. That little slice, that little cut into the plastic outer layer of the bag and into the mushroom block is really the source. And so that's exactly what the mushrooms grow out of, whether it be blue oysters, pink oysters, golden oysters, lion's mane. That is the source that the mushrooms say, I want to grow out of, just like a knot in a tree, or out of the ground itself, or whatever it is. It's looking for that oxygen and that humidity. So it only comes from there. And with blue oysters, all the oyster varieties, they grow a little bit faster. You'll have mushrooms in as little as 5 days. We typically say like within 2 weeks, you're going to have your first flush, no matter what, of oysters. It's about 3 weeks for lion's mane, which is more of a kind of bulbous white mushroom. It's become very popular. It's a fantastic sort of medicinal mushroom as well as tasting fantastic too. But then once you take that fruiting, you just take it by the hands is my preference and just sort of uproot it. And so you take the mushroom fruiting body and it pulls up a little bit of the substrate, but not too much on the backside. And you can just use a knife and trim that little bit of substrate at the backside. And all of it is edible. Stems, caps, everything. That's one thing that people kind of have a little bit of misinformation about or whatever is just the stem not being edible. Sometimes it takes a little bit more of a cook time on the stem, but you can just chop it smaller, throw it in the hot pan, and you're good to go. And then you would just need to take the block after you've harvested it. You've got some exposed substrate on that line, and just make sure you spray mist that area pretty well after that first flush, and you'll get a second flush. And foreseeably a third flush as well. And the pounds do diminish. So there's what's called the biological efficiency of the block. It can only produce so much given the nutrients that are available to it within that block. But across the board, the mushrooms should produce, about, safely saying about 1 pound to 2 pounds in the first flush, about half that in the second flush, and about half that on the third flush. But if you've got a nice humid environment, you could produce up to 3 pounds in the first flush, 1.5 pounds in the second flush, and about maybe ½ pound in the third flush. So it's a pretty good amount of mushrooms.
Yeah. And you make this all sound very, very easy, and I'm sure that it is, but what can go wrong? Like, I've never obviously grown fungus before. And what are things that people need to watch out for? Can they go bad? Is there what are the issues that people could have rise up?
Sure. And I'm glad you actually called it fungus, because that's what it is. And a lot of people still actually will call it like a plant or a vegetable or an herb or some other category, but it is fungus. And the age-old battle is fungus versus bacteria. So fungus as a category, as a kingdom, it does include molds. And so there are competitor molds that we have to deal with on the farm itself, and we remediate those. And again, we're only sending out healthy blocks where the mushroom mycelium has taken over, has colonized, no competition, no contamination. So you shouldn't really worry about anything inside of the block happening at all. The external variants that could happen would be if it most 90% of what we see is if it gets dried out. So really keep them pretty moist, have a fine mist spray. Again, my recommendation would be actually inside of a tub, and you can just mist spray inside the tub, close the lid too. That'd be just fine. But keeping it moist is the biggest thing that we get people feedback on. Is that line itself becomes dry, doesn't produce mushrooms, and it's just because it wasn't getting misted enough or watered enough. That's the only thing. So, in the rare case that there were some sort of a contamination from an external environment, we do fully refund all those blocks that do actually that don't produce mushrooms. That's kind of our credo is, we guarantee the health of block on the inside. If you have trouble growing the block, we're responsive to emails, phone calls. We want to really grow this part of the business, and we love it. We love people coming into the farm and picking up blocks and being curious. And we saw a huge uptick for the holidays for people giving gifts. And that is it's so encouraging to see, hearing stories about like a daughter would come in and be buying a block for her father. He's like, he actually doesn't like mushrooms, and he said how much he hates them and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to get him this not as a jab, but as an educational tool. So we can do this together as a daughter and father, and I can show him like the majesty of mushrooms, and then we can take that growth that we had ourselves and then cook it, and then learn how to cook it as well and make it into a recipe that he may like. And it just gives me chills still to kind of like think about those little moments that we're kind of sending away with a mushroom block, and kind of educating people by doing hands-on learning instead of just having a 30-year-old bias of grandma's mushrooms that were all soggy from a can.
Right, exactly. And that's you talk about being a visual learner, and that's exactly the way I am with many, many things. So, Lance, what is your favorite mushroom to grow and eat? I guess those don't necessarily have to be the same thing, but what are your favorites there?
Oh, it's again like proud papa moments. Like they're all my children. I love one more than the other. No, I think that my long-standing favorite has been lion's mane. I love to harvest lion's mane. It's got this earthy kind of almost sweetness to it, and it's again, if you hop on the website, it's a fully bulbous mushroom. It's white. It's beautiful. It grows in 3 weeks, but it grows like almost like bread. It just fills more and more and more, as opposed to like the stem and cap varieties that tend to actually be, little mushrooms growing into, what we know to be mushrooms. Lion's mane is incredibly versatile for cooking. You can cut it like steaks. You can tear it down. You can make crab cakes out of it. It has almost like a whitefish type of mouthfeel and consistency. But the newest favorite of mine is maitake. So we started cultivating and growing maitake about 6 months ago. And it's just fantastic. I think for people in Minnesota, it's become kind of a gateway mushroom where it's smaller, it's a little more feathery, it's a little more, it's not as big and kind of heavy as some of the other mushrooms. So you can just take those little, almost like petals and put them in the pan, and they sear up very well. They get almost crispy if you get a hot enough pan. And so that sort of, it kind of breaks apart this whole bias to like soggy mushrooms, because with a hot pan and maitake, you can get these nice little crispy mushrooms, and the flavor is fantastic. It's akin to shiitake, but with a little bit more kind of wildness to it. It's called hen of the woods in foraging terms. And we actually have a lot of it grows in Minnesota too.
Wonderful. Lance, we are bumping up against the end of our time here, and I've got a couple of little quick fire questions that we ask everybody at the end of our episodes. And so these are just short, quick, just to let everybody know a little more information about you and what's going on. So the first one is, what is your favorite food grown in Minnesota?
Aside from mushrooms, of course.
You can go with mushrooms if you'd like. There are no limits.
No, I'll just lay in a category, actually, root vegetables. I think that we in Minnesota, because of our I'm looking outside right now, it's like 2 degrees. Because of our fantastic winters, we get some incredibly nutrient dense and flavorful root vegetables, because they have to fight to survive. They have to go deep, and they have to store nutrients and convert them to sugars. And so like carrots, I mean, even like garlic, which kind of not technically in the same category, but roasting, taking a nice roasting pan and just getting like the bounty from the farmer's market for the root vegetables with some mushrooms is one of my favorite things, because they taste so good. I know I'm giving my kids and myself really nutrient dense food that's not necessarily available in like a monoculture, even organic grown California huge farm. I think that's one thing we do really right here in Minnesota. And also berries. We do berries really well too.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah. And with the locally grown aspects of what we've got going on here, you reduce and eliminate many times a lot of the plastics that are used, and the transportation costs and emissions and all that kind of stuff is a beautiful thing as well. So what is your favorite place to visit in Minnesota?
Oh, man, I will be honest that I haven't done a lot of visiting in the past few years, as it's been a concentration on family and farm, but love to go like camping and just find the hidden gems. Going up the North Shore is always a kind of a favorite, because every time you go, it seems like you find something different. Get off on a beaten path, explore something new. I did grow up around the cities, and so Minnehaha Falls actually has a really special place in my heart. It's where my grandparents lived, and I remember it from being about 2 years old. So that's a great little place too.
And second to last question here is, what is essential reading for you?
Oh man, I geek out all the time. I read mushroom books almost like religiously. Paul Stamets is sort of the godfather of mushrooms, so his original books on how to grow gourmet medicinal mushrooms are fantastic. There's a book called Healing Mushrooms by Tero Isikopada, also a mushroom dude. And I do a little light reading at night on engineering and different kind of cutting edge sterilization techniques and mushroom production and all that kind of good stuff. So it's maybe a little different than the last book that I read for myself was actually Great Expectations, which was a huge undertaking, but that was about 4 years ago, pre mushroom business. So,
have you, with your mushroom books, have you read Entangled Life?
Yeah. Oh my God, it's on in my car as an audiobook, and I will seriously just after a hard day, lots of stress as a co-founder and owner, managing a growing company and just being exhausted, I will just pop that on like in 15-minute segments. And of course, I've read the whole thing, and it is one of the most beautiful, humbling, connecting books that I've ever experienced. I think that especially during COVID, it really has provided me with a sense of connection, and it really has re-energized my passion and my just base love for mushrooms and mycology.
Yeah, so I'll just Entangled Life is the name of the book, and I should probably look up the author while I'm in here, but do you know?
I don't remember the author exactly, but I'm a strong advocate for paperback books and just harkening back to the tactile form. But I do really love the audiobook. It's narrated. I forget the gentleman's name, but the narration is just like this fantastic, like mild British accent, and it reads almost like a novel meets like a little bit of like geeking out about, science and nature. But it's such a great audiobook.
Yep, Merlin Sheldrake.
Yes, Merlin,
the author. And and part of the reason, the book is fascinating. And there was I listened to Tim Ferriss's podcast, and he had, if I recall correctly, I think it was a Brazilian woman, and she talked about the book. And so I got the book and I listened to it as well. But just fascinating pieces in how mushrooms are genetically more closely related to humans than they are to plants, and just all that stuff is incredible. And there's so many things going on there. It was really great. I highly recommend that as well.
And not to drop a podcast while I'm on a podcast, but Radical Mycology is a fantastic, really, it's a wealth of knowledge. They've been around. It's a mushroom product company. They actually sell tinctures and now powders and other sort of supplements, but they're incredibly, the integrity is there. Products are super high quality, and they decided to launch a podcast just to educate people about mushrooms in all forms. And it's been around for about 4 or 5 years now. So there's a wealth of knowledge there. Explore the episodes and find things you like there, but there's a little bit for everybody.
Awesome. And I'll put links to all these in the show notes for everybody as well. So Lance, the last question we've got is a question from my 10-year-old. She created the smartest question of them all. And it's, if you were a plant, what plant would you be? And I suppose I should stretch out the definition of what we're going for here, but let's stick with plants.
Stick with plants. Oh goodness.
Plant or mushroom? Yeah. I'll give you the leeway.
Yeah, plant or mushroom, and I'll even extend it. One of my favorite plants to actually work with are orchids. I have an orchid in my house now that by hook or by crook I've had for about 8 years, and haven't treated it the exact way that you're supposed to with an orchid, and all these little techniques and such. But I think that I love orchids, and I wouldn't say that I'm beautiful in any way like that, but because orchids are just fantastic. But they're so resilient, and they've got grit, and they have this ability just to know where to go. And there's a patience to them that really is different from some plants that are just constant bloomers. You can time out with your watch. Orchids just are on their own kind of timeline. They produce a fantastic product that's beautiful, but it's also for a purpose. And I love their grit. I love that they just kind of like do things on their own, and they've been around forever. They fascinate me, but not as much as mushrooms, but they're pretty fascinating.
That's a great one. Good. Well, Lance, is there Lance Ram from R&R Cultivation? Is there anything about mushrooms I haven't asked you about that you want to make sure everybody knows?
The only thing I would touch on, that we didn't quite cover was, again, like the SAM-IM model, like try them. You may like them. That's our biggest sort of focus as a farm that's growing mushrooms, is really just educating individuals to kind of bring down that bias. But really, we're in this next stage of development where we're finally having our products tested for their nutrient load. And it's incredible how you don't have to be a vegetarian. Obviously, I'm not myself, but the majority of how I get my protein in my life is through mushrooms. And they have a tremendous amount of protein, amino acids. They're very complex, and they've got a lot of incredible immune boosting properties. And we're always very careful not to overextend, that they're not some sort of miracle food, but they really are. It's a really incredible produce that you can consume, and we just try and get people to recognize, the nutrient qualities of mushrooms and give them a second try if you haven't yet. If you don't love mushrooms, then give them a try and just explore it, and of course buy local and maybe even pick up a grow kit.
Perfect. Lance, where can everybody purchase a grow kit and learn more about you guys and find you and connect?
Central hub is always the website, so rrcultivation.com is the best place to kind of start. And from there, you can obviously order grow kits. The front landing page is get you through all of our mushrooms, gives you a little synopsis on what they are, taste profiles, a little bit of nutrient profiling. And grow kits are on there, t-shirts too a little bit, but it's a great place to start. And then from there, you can see all of our wholesale partners too. We'll be at a bunch of farmers markets. Like I said, we're in a couple right now if you want to bear the weather, and restaurants, we've got those listed as well. But Lunds and Byerly's, almost every co-op in the Twin Cities metro area, and Hy-Vee as well is our newest addition.
Wonderful. Well, Lance Ram from R&R Cultivation, thank you so much for spending time with us today. It was just a wealth of knowledge about how to grow mushrooms and what people need to know to get started with that. So I appreciate you being here, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.
See what I mean? Lance was just awesome. It was really great to talk with him about all the things going on, not only with his company, but how people can grow mushrooms and the benefits and how that makes sense for folks. So again, you can see pictures and just information and connect with R&R Cultivation. The show notes, go to minnesotagardening.com and search for mushrooms, and you will find that right there. So this is episode 15 of the podcast. The next episode, I am really, really excited for you to hear. We have the incredible, legendary, I might say, Doug Tallamy is here for the next episode of the Minnesota Gardening Podcast. So make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and don't miss that episode. So have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day, and I'll talk to you again soon.